Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'll be testing the accuracy of ESPN's NFL predictions and if they have any merit whatsoever. Before I get into it, please consider liking and subscribing to my channel for more NFL videos, but here we go. I was just minding my own business and I happened to roll across this 2025 NFL win total prediction video on ESPN's website, and in which Michael Clay predicts the win totals for every year. After I saw this article, I was like, okay, it's kind of interesting, but is it accurate at all? So I thought I would put it to the test. I started off using AI because, you know, who does it in 2025? It's the cool thing. And then, while it did look cool, it turned out to be blatantly lying to me. So it was pulling articles that were fake, it was pulling the wrong numbers. After a few hours of doing that, I decided, you know what, I'll just do it myself, and here we have it. So I was only able to find the data for the past 2 years because that's the only years in which ESPN has actually published formal win predictions on their website and not just over-unders, because over-unders, that's a 50% hit rate. I'm giving you no credit for that. I need win total predictions. So I'll start with 2024, go back to 2023, and then go over 2025, see what it says about the future. A little disclaimer first, it appears that their prediction model tends to not try to predict teams with a ton of wins, such as 15 or 16 wins, or a ton of losses, such as 1 or 2. They try to keep all the teams in the middle. However, that's not how it actually works out in the NFL season. For example, in 2024, there were 2 teams with 15 wins and 3 teams with 3 wins. Well, the lowest projections were 5 and the highest projections were 11, so that inherently makes this data not too great. Not a great start. Last year, ESPN had the top 5 teams being the Lions, the Chiefs, the Eagles, the Ravens, and the 49ers. These are pretty chalk picks, of course, and it didn't actually quite work out. And in fact, only one of these teams, the Baltimore Ravens, were they within 3 games of the correct win total. On the opposite side of the coin, the worst teams, I would think this would be a little easier to predict. But to be honest, it wasn't. Their worst teams were, if anything, more inaccurate than their best teams. So they had the Titans, the Patriots, and the Panthers as the 3 worst teams with 5 wins and then 6 wins for the Titans. What actually turned out to be the case was the Titans, the Giants, and the Browns all had 3 wins, and this was giving the Browns 8 wins as a prediction, and the Giants 7 wins as a prediction. So they way overshot it. They almost tripled the Browns' wins. Completely inaccurate. They also had the Jaguars, the Raiders, the Jets, the Bears. They had all those teams at 8 or 9 wins, and none of them were able to get past 5. So you're thinking, oh, okay, so they were bad with the top end of teams and they were bad with the bottom end of teams, so is this data just completely useless? Well, I guess their median teams were okay, and that is partially because they just predict everyone to do kind of average. So a lot of the teams in the middle, such as the Texans or the Bengals or the Cardinals, they were fairly accurate because they were roughly 500 on the season. To go a little further in depth, I ranked the teams by how wrong they were in 2024. So it headed off with the Minnesota Vikings, who did surprise the world, don't get me wrong, I know that, and the Commanders, who also surprised the world. They were off by 5 and 7 games, which is completely wrong. Now, I know you might think 5 or 7 games, I guess it's a smallish number, but when you're considering the NFL season, the difference between a 5-win season and a 12-win season is massive. And then on the opposite end, I know I already mentioned the Browns, but they also got the 49ers off by 5 games, and then 4 teams were off by 4 games. So, to be honest, I have all these charts for 2024, and it just shows that it was kind of a guess. Like, it might be a hard to predict season. I know every NFL season is hard to predict, but last year especially was a tough one for the NFL model, and I think that is largely because last year, more than most, there were a ton of teams that were at the very top end, especially with 2 15-win teams, and then there were a ton of teams at the very bottom end. So that just messes up the model entirely, and I decided, you know what, to truly know it, to truly test it, as an accountant, I need to get in depth in these numbers. how do I grade this? So I said an A. An A ranking is if you're within 1 game of the prediction. That's just a coin flip. That was a good guess. A B is within 2 games, moderately okay. A C is within 3. 3 games is a lot. You're pretty wrong with 3, but I guess that's passing. And then I didn't go down to D with 4. I just went to F. So 4 or worse off was an F, because then you're completely wrong. You go from being a number 1 seed in the playoffs to out of the playoffs with that difference. And in 2024, there were 9 A's, 6 B's, 6 C's, and 11 F's. So, to be honest, looking at this data, last year's predictions are just total random. Probably as you would have guessed. I mean, ESPN's fallen off a little bit. NFL's hard to predict, but a coin flip would have been just as useful as this information. But what about 2023? 2023 was actually a whole lot better for this ESPN model, and that is largely due to the fact that there was more parity in the NFL in 2023. The most wins for a team was 13 wins compared to 2 teams with 15 wins. A much more even season. In fact, there were 12 teams in between 8 and 10 wins. It's a huge spread, and there was only 1 team under 4 wins. That was the Panthers, a common bottom dweller. And using my same ranking the top 5 teams and predictions, they were actually all A's or B's last year. All 5 of their highest 5 predicted teams were A's, so they were roughly as good as they thought. However, some teams they didn't think were as good, such as the Ravens, who they predicted 10 wins, or the Lions, who they predicted 8 wins, overachieved, and they weren't quite as accurate, but it's not going to be perfect. This is definitely improvement over the year before. On the bottom end of the scale, it was improvement as well, with, of course, some surprises. Although I would say their biggest mistake was they predicted the Rams to only have 5 wins, which seemed to be clearly wrong. I mean, they're a good coach, good quarterback, good defense. It's hard to think a little bit thinking back to 2023, but that felt a little crazy, and they did shock them going with a 10-win season. So that was a big miss. The 3 teams that did end up doing the worst on the year were, however, complete failures on this model. The Patriots, the Jets, and the Panthers were all F's, with 4 or more games below their predictions. But looking at the overall ranking on my A, B, C, F rankings, not a bad year. There were 11 A's and 12 B's. So that is 23 out of 32 teams where you get a good grade from me, where you get like a good job predictor, 2 C's and 7 F's. If this is how they are every year, I would say this is a good model, fairly accurate to be honest. However, then you have to bring in 2024. 2024, as we know, was terrible and kind of borderline useless. But when I combine the two, the total numbers of A's and B's, there are 20 A's, 21 B's, so that is 41 out of 64. Not bad. 11 C's and 16 F's. So that means it is roughly as likely to be within 1 game as to be 4 or more games off. So it is too early to tell. Next year we will know a little more when there's more data to see the accuracy. But knowing this, let's look at their predictions for 2025, see what they can tell us. Well, one thing is, a lot of these teams will be way off, and in my opinion, 2 good examples would be the Chargers only at 8.5 wins. That feels very low. The Steelers at 7.5 wins. We all know for sure they're going to get at least 9. And then finally, this has been my hot take, but the Lions at number 1 with 12 wins feels a little high for a team that has lost so much. But what do you think? Do you think that these ESPN models are useful at all, or just kind of pure entertainment, kind of useless for their prediction value? Let me know if this does well. Maybe I'll check out some other versions such as NFL.com, Fox Sports, maybe Colin Cowherd or something like that. Just see around the league who actually is accurate at predicting this data. But thanks, like, comment, subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.